Sunshine Sound Podcast with your host, Christine Mathias.
You just get stuck. That's what happens to me anyway. That's what my writer's block usually looks like. And so on that song, what I did, I was just so frustrated. I just found a wacky drum track. I just sped it way up, and then I literally just slammed my palm on the keyboard. I was just like, fuck it, I can't write a song. I'm just mad at the piano. I just started slamming on it, and then somehow I actually liked how that sounded. Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 25 of the Sunshine Sound Podcast. So this one's a little bit different. So big news is that Tom and I are moving to New Mexico. So sadly we will be leaving San Diego. And so kind of to top off this podcast, at least for the San Diego portion of it, we thought we'd switch things up a bit. And Tom interviewed me. It was definitely kind of weird, but also fun to be on the other side of the microphone and to get interviewed. I don't really have more to say to introduce myself. This is already kind of weird as it is. So let's just get right to the interview.
All right, so today in the studio, can't believe I'm actually saying that, I have Christine Mathias, host of the Sunshine Sound Podcast. How you doing?
I'm good.
Stop laughing.
This is weird.
Yeah, it is weird. I don't know how this is working out, but we'll see how it goes. See if we can salvage something. So before we get into your background, let's start with, now, why did you do this podcast?
Okay, good question. As I get my giggles out. So I started it really because I was just meeting so many cool people in San Diego, cool musicians, and I wanted a chance to get to talk to them more, to hang out with them, and I thought it'd be a cool way to, promote local music. I like listening to people and asking questions, so I thought that I might have something to offer there, and so that's where it came from.
Well, it's interesting because it's a lot of pressure to just talk to people. So
sure.
Yeah, so you kind of went the hard way, I would say, but I guess more rewarding then. So talk a little bit more about what exactly you get out of doing the podcast. Just connecting with...
Yeah, I mean, it's connecting with people, and I keep going back to the podcast that I had with Lindsay White, and that's one of my favorite podcasts.
That was a really good one.
Yeah, where she said that after a show, one of our audience members came up to her and they said that that she made them feel seen, and I really liked that. And I guess I felt like that's the same thing that I get out of this podcast. I like the feeling of giving that to other people, like saying to the musicians that I see what you're doing, and I just think that it's like all the work that musicians put into being a musician. I think people not in the music scene don't necessarily know everything that goes into it. Like, first of all, it's just learning how to play an instrument. Like, Jesus Christ, it take a decade to be a really good musician. Okay, so that's step one. Just, spend 10 years of your life learning this craft. And then, just pour your entire heart and soul into something that you create, and then turn it around and sell your soul when you're trying to market your music. And the pain in the ass it is to book shows and do all this promotion. It is kind of crazy. Like, you kind of have to be a little bit crazy to be a musician. I feel like, especially now, so I'm just curious, given all that, why are there so many musicians? Why are they doing this? And I think that when you give people the platform to talk about that, a lot of really interesting things come out,
Well, it was funny because some of the feedback we got, and I know when I did the interview with you, it was kind of like a therapy session. It was a chance to sort of unload that pent up, I don't know if you want to call it rage, but just frustration with how hard some of this is. You love doing it, but it's the promotion. And that was a lot of feedback we got as people were like, man, I got a chance to really unburden myself.
Sure, absolutely. And I feel like there's maybe also a little bit of, I mean, I don't want to project my own feelings, but some kind of guilt there. It's just like, I should be fortunate to have any fans or to be able to work in the music scene at any level. And it's like, so this is a part of it. This is a part of the music business. I should be cool with marketing and talking about myself, and it's a way to connect with your fans and all this. But it's just, when you think about being a musician, when you first pick up an instrument, like, this isn't explained to you, right?
Right, yeah. And well, let's talk about that a little bit. Then what's your experience with marketing? So what was the first band? Well, I guess we'll just take it way back. What was your first band that you were in?
My first actual band, I played music, on my own. Like, when I was really little, I just had a piano that I messed around on. And then, like, my first band was the school bands. I don't know if that really counts. We didn't have to do any marketing or anything. It was just everyone's parents showed up.
Yeah, it's kind of a captive audience, right?
And I tried throughout high school and college to start a few different bands, but we never got our shit together enough to actually play out. I mean, I played open mics here and there, but I guess really...
So you had a band in college that you did open mics with? This is the first time hearing.
No, not in college.
Okay.
In college,
in high school.
In high school, I tried to form a band with some other people. I played open mics by myself.
With an acoustic guitar?
With an acoustic guitar, yeah. Which really wasn't actually a good fit for me, but it was just like, I thought that was like the only way. You want to write music and perform. It seems like the easiest path is to just pick up an acoustic guitar and play an open mic, but eventually learned that that's not really my style, and that's okay. But, it took me a while to figure that out, and that there are other ways to make music other than that. But so I guess my first real band that was that's like in the traditional sense of like playing with your friends, not a school bands, was in law school with the Learned Hands, which you were in as well.
Yeah, that was Penn State's premier law school band. So walk us through that. I mean, how did that come about?
Yeah, so that was really fun because in undergrad I went to Portland State and I minored in jazz, and that was kind of a rough experience because it was like when I was in grade school and junior high and high school, like, I played saxophone in all the bands, and I was like, always first chair, and I was like, it seemed like one of the few musicians who took it seriously, and I got a lot of great feedback. And then it's like, big fish, little pond thing. And then you go to this big university, and I was so intimidated. I felt completely overwhelmed by the expectations, and I just felt like I was not at the level of everyone else. And it was really challenging for a number of years. And when I got out towards my end of my undergraduate career, I was just like, I'm not good enough to be a musician. It's just not, I just don't have it. Like I went for it and I saw the level that everyone else was at, and I'm just, for whatever reason, I wasn't there, and I just didn't have the confidence at that point to keep going. So I feel like kind of in giving up on music and a creative life, I was like, fuck it, I'll just go to law school, because that's what you do when you don't.
It's one way to take the pressure off.
Right, exactly. But I was just like, I feel like I've had this kind of more intellectual side to me and the kind of a creative side to me. And I was just like, I tried it in the creative world. It's not working. I'm not good enough for this world. So I was just like, just go completely in the other direction, in a place where I thought this, like, that chapter of my life is over, that music chapter, and that's fine. So then I get to law school and I meet you. You're playing in this band, the Learned Hands. It was super fun band. And And I somehow started playing saxophone with you guys on some songs here and there. So we did like a lot of cover songs. We also had some a lot of original songs, actually. You'd be surprised how creative people in law school actually could be.
Yeah, it was quite exceptional. Some of the talent we got out of that. And it was kind of a captive audience because I've said this twice now, captive audience. I don't know what I'm saying that, but it was sort of a microcosm, and you can talk about this, but just in the sense that wasn't really what being a band is like in the real world, because you don't have all these people that will show up and because you're the only band and they want to see
exactly.
and so it was kind of a harsh lesson after we got out.
But I feel like that it was exactly what I needed in my life at that point. It was like stripping away all of that stuff from being in jazz studies at Portland State. It was like we weren't talking about like key or sight reading music or doing anything complicated. Like we were just doing it because it was fun. It just got back to like the reason why you play music, because it's fun. I understand wanting to challenge yourself and everything, but but that's not ultimately the reason why I do it. And like you said, it was like this awesome community, this law school in this tiny town. So booking gigs, we didn't need to like, do we even have a website for the band or anything? We had a MySpace page.
Because we ended up selling it to another band that happened to take that name. So,
But the point is, it's like, right, you go and play one of the 3 bars in town and the whole law school shows up and they're a great audience. They're dancing and singing along and paying attention to you. It was like the band experience I never had. And who would have thought in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania in law school that's where like I'd rekindle my positive relationship with music.
yeah, and that's interesting. If we go back to your experience at Portland State, I mean, you talked about how you were first chair and everything in high school, and then you go to college and you're like, yeah, I can walk the walk with these guys, and then you get in there and you're like, well, wait a minute, do I even really want to play this game of competitiveness? It's kind of like, I think, being on a sports team in high school and you're the, starting whatever. You go to college and it's just up a level. And it's like, well, where do you go from there? The fun gets stripped away.
Exactly.
And so I think that's interesting that there's a recreational component to music, that there's a competitive side and a recreational side, and sometimes those two are at odds and sometimes they seem to go together. So, okay, well, let's, I think move on to after law school, what happened?
So after law school, we moved to Vermont. And at that point, I knew I really wanted to continue to play music. And so I also, throughout law school, I was still writing my own songs on acoustic guitar, occasionally playing at the open mic in Carlisle. Again, still not the best fit for me, but it was still an outlet. I still liked writing those songs. I think did you actually help me record a few of those songs right around when I moved? I remember
when we went to Vermont, yeah.
Yeah, so I recorded a few of my original tracks and then put an ad up on Craigslist to try and find some musicians to play with, and that was certainly intimidating, but to just put yourself out there, being like, I want to play my original music now. Let's see what happens. And then this guy, JP, he responded. He was a hippie up in Vermont, another guitar player. And then so we formed a band. It was originally called, what was it? Oh, Ollie Stands For. As in, it came up in the context of fuck Trey Anastasio and Ollie Stands For. But...
for the people out there who don't know who Trey Anastasio is, I know this is rare.
Yes.
Nobody would know this in Vermont, but explain that.
So that is the I guess you'd say the front man of Fish, which is a popular jam band in Vermont, especially. So so eventually that band, the name changed, became Freight. And so that band, it was kind of, I guess we were just pretty much a jam band. Like we played some of my songs, some of JP's songs. So pretty mellow band, I would say. I played saxophone on some tracks and guitar on other tracks and sang, and we put out an album. So that was fun for a bit, but still didn't quite feel like the best fit for me.
Yeah, and I was gonna talk about that. Is what is it like when you really want to play with musicians, you want to have fun, and you get together with people you really like, but something along the way, whether it's a musical fit, whether maybe it's a personality thing, doesn't just quite sync up, and how difficult that can be. That experience with Freight was tough because you were really close with those people, but stylistically it just really wasn't. It did pave the way for something else, which we'll talk about, but how that can happen in music. Absolutely.
And I think at that point I really just wanted to play with someone.
And the band was called we said all he stands for,
but that name didn't last too long because it was really confusing. I don't think it's good to have a band name that people have to be like, what? So I mean, like you said, those guys were great, but I was just so enthusiastic to play with anyone really that I was like, GP's awesome. I like hanging out with him. Let's play music. Like I didn't really give much more thought to that. So it can be challenging though. I mean, like when you're in a band with someone, it's like a relationship. I mean, it's like a polyamorous relationship because a lot of people are in more than one band at once, and like a band usually has more than two people. It's a really complicated relationship. And so, yeah.
And there's voting power.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
Okay, so that band ended on good terms, but
for sure.
And then so what was next after that? What did you do?
Well, it wasn't really like one band ended and the other one started up. It was while I was still in Freight. I really wanted to play in an all-girl punk band. I had this, like, I grew up listening to Riot Girl, like a lot of my favorite bands, like Bikini Kill, Sleater Kinney, and The Hole, even though questionable whether or not Hole's Riot Girl, but I don't have to get into that. So I really want to start a Riot Girl band, even though Vermont seemed like a strange place for it because it's very much a jam band scene, or singer-songwriter folk kind of scene. But surprisingly, there was a little bit of a punk scene there, more hardcore. But so that band I feel like was more intentional. Like I had an idea for it when I put out my first ad for Freight. It was kind of just, I wrote these songs, whoever wants to play with me, let's see what happens. And the next time around, I was like, no, this is what I want to do, is form an all-female Riot Girl band. And so that first started out with Jane Boxall. She reached out, she responded to the ad. I think she almost played in a band with you to begin with. Vermont's a small state.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why that didn't work out. Something, maybe she was being overseas
or
playing.
Or something. Like the timing just didn't work out. Right. But the timing did work out with Jane. And so we first formed a band with a violin player. We were called Pink Fury. And that was great for a little bit. But then it ended up not working out with Emma, unfortunately. I still think that bands would have been cool continuing with Emma, but there was difference in opinions. I don't know how much I want to get into that.
Okay, well, I won't probe further on that, but it's tough. I mean, sometimes difficult decisions have to get made, and in hindsight, sometimes it isn't the right decision.
Right.
And so, okay, so you've got Pink Fury going and building up a following in Vermont, and then you transition to Dollfight.
Yeah, so Dollfight, so we brought on Kelly on bass, and then when Emma left Pink Fury, we decided to change the name of the band to Dollfight. So that was me, Kelly, and Jane. So we're a punk three-piece in Vermont, and that was pretty cool. It was kind of like exactly what I had in mind, what I wanted to do. It was there's been a few times in my past that I've actually found other musicians who were into the same music that I was in, but it was just like, wait, you guys know L7 and Bikini Kill, and you want to cover those songs? That's so cool. Like growing up, like none of my friends were listening to that kind of music. And so we were all kind of had the same perspective on music, the same goals with what we wanted the band to be, which was really cool. Like there was that kind of band experience that I dreamed about having since high school. It just took until I was in my mid-20s to actually execute it.
Right. And so you had Freight, you moved on to something that seemed to be a better fit. You're all excited. Went on tour, is that right with it?
Yeah, we went on a few tours around the Northeast. The furthest we got was down to DC. We played like Pennsylvania. Went down to New York City a few times, and Boston, and Portland, Maine actually has a lot of cool venues there. We played there a few times.
And you were also simultaneously involved on saxophone in another band.
Yes.
In Vermont as well.
Yeah, so much music happening in Vermont.
And we'll touch on the Ween tribute too. You're also in another Ween tribute for a bit too.
Yes. But so another band that was in was called Steady Betty. That band also had a different name. When we first started, we were called Pantytown, but I think some people didn't want to say that name to their parents or something. I don't remember why we changed the name. I thought it was great.
They probably had trouble putting that on the billboard for Discover Jazz Fest Burlington.
Maybe that's what it was. A little more mainstream. So anyway, so that band was an all-female rock steady band. So if you're not familiar, that's kind of an early reggae. So very kind of really super laid back, chill music, a lot of really cool vocal harmonies. We had some amazing singers. So I was playing saxophone in that, and we had trumpet and bass guitar, drums, and then depending on the night, 2 or 3 singers, including Kat Wright and Miriam, who are like 2 of the best singers in Vermont. So it was the harmonies and everything are outrageously good. That was a really cool band.
Okay, and also going on at the time, and this sort of, I think, dovetails with sort of you talk about your experience at Portland State and how competitive that was, and then you started Girls Rock Vermont. Was that partly due to your experience at Portland State and then your shift in coming back to music as being something fun?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the funny thing with that, as I mentioned in the podcast with Mel, so Girls Rock Camp, so this was actually a thing that was started at Portland State by a student there in a class that I took. I forget what exactly the class was called, but I remember the professor was Sally Eck. And we had a capstone project, which means we had to do something that involved the community. And for my class, I did something like I created a zine on how to play guitar or something like that. But so this girl in the class before me, she actually created this music camp. And so what it is that only girls come to the camp and learn how to play a rock instrument. So guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, or vocals. And then they have a week, they write an original song, and then they perform at the end of the camp at some cool local venue. And so the funny thing is, when I was at Portland State, I was in such a shitty place with my own music. Like, even though this camp was going on there, I was too intimidated and too scared to volunteer myself, because I thought that I wasn't good enough as a musician, which is kind of ironic for what the camp is, because it's all about empowerment and figuring out what you can do. And so yeah, to answer your question, I think that by the time I got to Vermont and had a change in my perspective on music, I think that was one of the big reasons why I wanted to start Girls Rock Vermont. And Jane, who was in Dollfight, she had experience volunteering at the rock camp in New York. And so we had talked about it and how cool it'd be to have one in Vermont. So that was definitely a big push there. And I mean, one thing that I haven't mentioned, but I think is worth mentioning, is that like at Portland State, and I don't want to blame it on this, but it was just an interesting environment because I was the only girl in the whole jazz program. So that, I think, kind of added to the level of intimidation. Like, I think it was just harder because I don't know, I didn't have many close friends in the program, and I just kind of felt like an outsider as being the only woman in the program. And then throughout my other band projects, and learning hands. Well, we had Kate singing, so I wouldn't say I was the only girl there, but with Freight, I was the only girl. So it was kind of like I had to intentionally form an all-female band for that to happen, and kind of seeing the magic of having an all-female band. And so wanting to give girls the opportunity to see what that's like in a field that is very male-dominated. And so that can be intimidating in a way that I think that that to be a good musician and performer, you have to have a certain amount of confidence, or at least be able to fake that confidence to put on a good performance, which can be hard to do if you don't have that support.
And I think that's interesting. We talk a little bit about the male-dominated music industry, and it's funny because you hear people say like, no, there's women in music. They're up there singing all the time. But what you don't hear or see, unless you're a musician, is that it's the way that women are sort of pigeonholed into either being a singer, or that there's this like all-female band as a thing. It can't just be three musicians together. You don't say an all-male band. Right. That'd be a weird thing to say. And I'll even say for myself that when Jane, I felt the need, or at least somebody else in the band felt the need to say, are we okay with a female drummer? And I was kind of like, why does this even matter? And of course we were, but the fact that we had to ask the question was ridiculous.
Sure.
And so yeah, I think that's amazing what Mel does, and what you did as well. So I think actually it's a good time to take it. We'll get into more of your music, but let's take a break here. And I'm sorry, I'm a little rough on these transitions. But, I don't do this. So we're gonna listen to a song by Denim Robot, which we'll talk about after the break. And this is called Feather. We're gonna do Feather. Okay, we'll take a short break.
Floating through the air, I'm sailing in through your
right, we're back. So that's a good track. I know that track very, very well. So tell me about that. Well, what does it mean?
Jesus.
That's what they always ask. What does it mean?
All right, so that's a track by Denim Robot. That's the most recent track. I don't know. It's hard because, and I know I asked guests who are on, like, what's the meaning behind their songs and things, but I mean, in a way, it's like I write songs because I have trouble putting these thoughts and feelings into words. So it's kind of abstract, and to some extent, I want to leave it up to the listener. I mean, I think it also, but I would say that generally, I think the track touches upon some of my kind of body dysmorphia issues, but also placing that in the context of like having more perspective on the whole universe and realizing that my body image issues aren't that big.
Yeah, and I think wow, that's pretty deep. That's a lot going on there. I think sometimes it's helpful that we can put this stuff into music, and helps us stand back and realize, in the grand scheme of the cosmos, maybe these issues aren't as big, and yet they still dominate our day.
Exactly.
And that's what can be tough. As far as instrumentation goes on that, to talk a little bit about, I hear, there's drums on there.
Right.
And how does that work?
So Denim Robot, we're a two-piece. So Tommy here is on guitar, and the rest of the sounds are coming from my computer, basically. So I make the drum loops and everything in Logic using a variety of plugins, and then I'm playing my keyboard to create all the MIDI sounds and the traditional piano sounds. I definitely say on this one that Tommy here had a lot of. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think as our songs go along more, that our songwriting has been more collaborative. Like you've been taken on more of like a producer role, so to speak, and just in terms of that, yeah. So like I come up with kind of the structure of the song, and then Tom adds the guitar, but also you've been making a lot of really helpful suggestions for like how to change the vocal lines and what effects to add, and even like, moving some of the MIDI sounds around and everything.
Well, I think it's interesting because on the first, I actually had a very difficult time understanding what sound you were going for when this project started. I had never heard music like this, and adding guitar to it as being the only real instrument was quite the challenge. So, but now as we're going along, I feel like I kind of get it, and so I think we're collaborating a little bit more. So let's talk about. We didn't talk about your transition to playing keyboard, and we want to talk about. You said Logic and using plugins and stuff like that. So how did that come about? Because you last we had mentioned you were playing guitar and singing in a punk band. So what happened after that?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so we moved again to Boston, and so I split ways with Dollfight. But so I saw that kind of as an opportunity to try out a new sound, to try out making new music. I kind of feel like with music, it's constantly been like I'm trying to find where I fit. Like I still felt like I started off with like trying to do like singer-songwriter kind of stuff, and I realized that wasn't for me. Playing straightforward jazz, like that scene is so not me. And then like with, the jam band scene, that was not for me either. Even the punk scene, like it was a lot of fun, but I kind of felt like my songs were getting more complicated. Like I don't think many people can keep just playing like, 4/4 3-chord songs.
Well, I think what you're saying is not that it wasn't for you, but it's that it had run its course.
Sure, maybe that's a better way to put it. I like that. And so I had always been listening. For a while I've been listening to other kind of like experimental kind of electronic music. Like The Knife is probably my biggest influence. And so I guess I just started out wanting to just make different sounds on my laptop. I played like when I was in high school, I played around a little bit with making electronic loops and things. But I didn't really go anywhere with it mostly because I didn't know what I was doing or what I was going to do with it after I made it.
Funny that everybody seems to have that same story.
Sure. And it's also funny how keyboards were actually, piano was actually my first instrument, but I never had lessons. Like I got a piano sometime when I was a kid. I don't even remember how young. It was just for as long as I remember, I had it, and I would just mess around with it. But I never, like I said, I never took lessons when I was a kid. But it's just funny, as I even have memories of like being at Portland State and being in the practice rooms, and I'm like, oh, I need to do like my 2 hours of saxophone practice, and there'd always be a piano in there, and I'd always find myself on my breaks going to the piano to play the piano, and I'm like, I didn't quite place it together that like that's really the instrument I wanted to play, and I also kind of like for a while regretted that I never took piano lessons, and like, I felt like I missed out on something. I was just like, yeah, this kind of instrument you have to learn when you're a kid, or else like it's too complicated. And then I was just like, why do I believe this narrative? Like, how is this serving me? It's really not. It's like, I want to play piano. So I'm like, well, what happens if I actually decide to take it seriously? And so I was like, I got a big keyboard and just a MIDI keyboard, M Audio, and I signed up to get lessons from a private teacher, and I did that for about 6 months until I couldn't really afford it anymore. But I'm glad that I had that experience of actually having lessons just to make sure my form and everything was good. I was on the right track. And then but since then I've really I love piano. It makes sense to me in a way more so than guitar does. I love the sound of it, the versatility of it, being able to play with all these different sounds and plugins and loops, and it's a great instrument. So I've continue to be practicing every day. Like I still feel like I'm not some master keyboard player or piano player, but I also realize that I have the rest of my life to learn. Like what's the rush? It's not like you have to learn when you're like between these ages as a child, or else you're never going to learn piano. Like that story doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, and it's funny that we develop these stories, that we have these barriers. When talking to Mel, and other people who have done the girls rock and ladies rock, about how just in their head they were like, I can't do this. I can't. And it's like, well, why not? I think the thing with music is it's incredibly intimidating as you get older, because there is that performance and being in front of people and sort of exposing yourself and being vulnerable and all that stuff. But those narratives are tough. They're tough to break down because they're somewhat self-reinforcing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the harder thing, like you said, it's hard to learn as an adult. It's like when you're a kid, it's like you're used to being bad at everything. It's like you see a kid playing piano, playing guitar, whatever, it's like everyone expects them not to sound great. And it's like if a kid can strum out 3 chords, you're like, wow, he's a genius. Like, but it's just as an adult, you just have this picture in your mind. If you see an adult sitting down at a piano, you're like, they're probably going to be good. But
well, it's interesting because you think that that's how people are. I think people maybe, and that's what keeps us from doing it, but I think people maybe aren't actually as critical as we think that they would be. And I think kids are more willing to take a risk because they don't know what it's like to be hurt yet.
Yeah.
And once you know that, you start to just go, it's better to err on the safe side of not putting myself out there maybe. But I don't know, people are harsh. But at the same time, when you see with girls rock and these other, that a lot of times people are just so inspired to see you just stand up there.
Sure.
And do it for that reason.
And I think that's a good point. I think that people are a lot more harsh in our heads than we think they're going to be. And I think it's interesting how many people are in bands and everything for the first time when they're in high school, which for me was just like my most self-conscious time in my life. Like I think it's pretty amazing that people are able to like be in a band and get up in front of people at that age when other kids are so judgmental and you're so concerned with what people think of you. I think that's one of the benefits of getting older and having more perspective on these things is that you realize even if people do think that stuff, it doesn't matter. It doesn't take anything out of the joy that I have for playing music.
Yeah, and for any non-musicians or people that are thinking about taking the plunge, as it were. Does it get any easier? Is getting up there in front of people, is making music and putting yourself out there, because a lot of times I think that this is people that are having issues or depressed, or even with myself, is that this is the time when I need to be making the music, but I don't feel like I can or want to. And it's like, do you feel like it gets easier as you're a musician, or does it get harder, or how does your perspective change as you start doing it?
Sure. I guess it's kind of like, it doesn't necessarily get easier. In the sense that you keep figuring out different ways to challenge yourself. And I like to continually push my edge, but your confidence builds. That's the thing. And then you also see the rewards from it. So you find something within yourself. You find the kind of the motivations to keep going, because you can see what just putting in that little bit of effort each day is going to bring, and it's worth it.
Right, I see. So it's like the struggle. You have to struggle at something in life. You might as well struggle at something that has that internal reward at the end. I think a lot of people might see it as like, once I get up on stage 10 times, I'll get over my anxiety.
Sure.
And it really, it might for some people, but it really doesn't work that way.
If it did, I think that's also some of the fun of performing. It's like you kind of, like, I don't think, at least for me, the nerves don't go away. It's just I interpret them in a different way. It's like, it's sometimes I can switch it instead into excitement. It's kind of when you can embrace those emotions and kind of not try to push them away, and kind of see them as like I'm getting all pumped up. Like, usually I would be in bed at this hour, but I am wide awake. Like, it's very energizing.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, cool. So we're gonna play another one of your tracks. This is called "Erase Me" by Denim Robot. Okay, we're back. Let's talk about that song.
Yeah. So, I like talking about this song because that song came out of kind of a drought in songwriting. Why am I blanking on the phrase? When you can't write anything?
Writer's block.
Writer's block. Thank you. That's kind of funny that that's the word that I blanked on. Anyway, so I was just like, sometimes I think especially with no, I wouldn't say especially at Denim Robot. It's happened in every band I've been in, is that after you've been in a band for a certain amount of time, you kind of see what your sound is. You get used to it. And so it's like, it's great. You have like, oh, this is our sound. This is what my band sounds like. And then you try to write songs and you're like, wait, does this sound exactly like the last 5 songs I wrote? And then so you start to get critical and you're like, this sounds too much like this song. And this one sounds too much like this song. And then you just get stuck. That's what happens to me anyway. That's what my writer's block usually looks like. And so on that song, what I did, I was just so frustrated. I just found a wacky drum track. I just sped it way up, and then I literally just slammed my palm on the keyboard. And I was just like, fuck it, I can't write a song. I'm just mad at the piano. And it just started slamming on it. And then somehow I actually liked how that sounded, and I was like, all right, I guess this is the song. And it sounds a bit different from a lot of the other songs that we have.
Yeah, you don't hear that as a creative process outside of the avant-garde jazz
right.
field. So interesting. Okay, well, we'll have to remember that when I listen to it. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty, the chord, like, it's not chords. It's just like the hand slamming on the piano. Like, it's not in any key.
Oh, good. So I think as we sort of wind down at the end here, I think it's a good chance to sort of reflect back on the podcast. For everyone that doesn't know, we're actually moving to New Mexico starting over. Right. So I just was going to ask you, what do you think some experiences you had with the podcast? Anything memorable that you want to talk about, or guests that you've had? I know there have been so many, so I can try to count back through. But let's just start with the first one. We had Jeff Tragesser over.
Yeah, Jeff is great. I mean, they've all been great. That feels like so long ago now, but that was like Jeff. Like a lot of people have been on. We've met at Open Oscillator, which is one of the things that I'm really going to miss from San Diego. It's this open mic night for electronic music. And so Jeff was able to talk about how that gets started and just the really cool experience that is. And so we had a few guests from that, like Ken, Groove Squatch.
Right, yeah. Ken,
and Jam Noble, what's his actual John.
Yeah, Pretty Howtown.
Pretty Howtown, of course. Yeah, and so it's been cool because, like I said, like this podcast has kind of been an excuse to reconnect with these people that I've met in San Diego, like either through Open Oscillator or through Rock and Roll Camp for Girls San Diego, or just other bands that we've seen or heard about or been recommended to. Or the other thing was the music video extravaganza that we put on last year. So that's like, it's actually a lot of really cool music videos in San Diego, which I wonder if it's because we're so close to LA. I think it's amazing because
we kind of, when we got here, we'd been here for a year or so, and we were like, I don't know if there's really a music scene here. And then you had this idea for the podcast, and all of a sudden, the musicians came out of the woodwork. What are your thoughts on the San Diego music scene, having been here 3 years, but really in the scene maybe a year?
Yeah, I think what's been interesting in talking to people on the podcast is like everyone knows each other, which, I mean, you think it's like San Diego's a big city, over 1 million people here, but somehow the music scene is really small. It's just like, oh yeah, Hexa, like everyone's played with Hexa, it seems like. And Parker Meridian, like everyone knows, like there's a handful of bands that like everyone knows. And they're really supportive of each other. It's like, I think it's a challenging scene because it's so transient. I mean, we're leaving. A lot of people leave because it's so expensive here. I think a lot of people want to spend some time in San Diego, whether it's to live here or to just to visit on vacation. So I feel like it's hard to build a music scene in a place where people keep moving, or most of the people in the city at any given time are tourists from another town. So that being said, the musicians that are here are really supportive of each other. I see them, cross promoting each other on social media. They're always, saying like, oh, you should play with this band. You should check out this band. So it's like everyone here just seems to be doing it because they love it. I wonder if it would be different if we were in LA or in New York, where everyone, maybe not everyone, but I think probably there are more people who are trying to make it, whatever that means.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's reflected in the music as well. There's a lot of intriguing musical styles that we had coming in, a lot of experimental stuff because we were building the collective. And so, I mean, I have to say that I liked everyone that came in, all of the, and I'm sure you did as well.
Absolutely.
But some really unexpected but interesting music coming out of San Diego that I hadn't seen out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing I would say on that is just the quality of the music has been outstanding. And I mean, I think it goes to show, like, not to downplay anything people are doing, but just that the recording process is so accessible now that any band that's playing out has a high quality recording, which is pretty cool. And but also it's just interesting because it's like, some of these bands, like, I still listen to, like, instead of like listening to the same music I've been listening to for 10 years, I'm like, yeah, let's listen to some local music. Because it's like, what is really the difference between these tracks that we've played on this podcast and like the music that they're playing in Target? Like, I don't see the difference in the quality of music. Like, any of these bands could easily be famous. And I'm not just saying that to be nice. I mean, it's just pretty, I don't know. I mean, I think it just goes to show you how kind of innate it is to create music and how many people can really do it. It's not just something that only a handful of really special people can do it, and not to downplay all the effort it takes to create something. But there's so much more music than what they play on the radio and what the vast majority of people are listening to.
Yeah, I think there's a general, some people have an assumption, and even I think myself, where if a band is just coming in, like a local band, you're like, well, I'm not expecting much. And then you hear it, and maybe there's even a little mental block that you have that's like, well, if they don't only have 60 likes, the music, maybe that tarnishes my view a little bit. And I have to step back and go, well, wait a minute. I remember hearing the Blood Ponies and Park Meridian, and I was like, I want this music.
And Hexa.
Hexa too.
Hexa, I actually listen to a lot.
Yeah.
That's speaking of influences, I mean, they are one of my favorite bands that have been on here. Like, I don't know how they're not famous. I don't know how most of these bands aren't famous, or like Veronica or Lindsay.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, yeah, it's all of them.
Yeah, so I guess it goes to show you how much luck really is involved.
I mean, it's luck, and I think it's also marketing.
Right, and the marketing side. It's
Yeah.
tough because being a musician, you may not want to do the marketing or feel good about it, and it's unfortunately a side of it if you want to do it for that reason. So
Right.
And you've talked a lot with musicians about that. So
Yeah.
lots of podcast material on marketing.
Absolutely.
Not a lot of people like it, but it's a necessary evil, I guess. So, okay, so what is next for Christine here? Do you have any shows coming up or music?
No, we're leaving in a week,
Okay.
man. But we are working on a new album. So kind of been chugging along on that for Denim Robot. So we have 8, 9 songs done.
Mm-hmm.
So hoping to get a couple more. We'll release that soon.
Awesome. And then what are your plans for the podcast going forward?
I mean, I'm going to keep doing it. I see it as a good chance to meet musicians in New Mexico. So I also really want to, I still have this idea, and I'm going to do it, is to take the podcast on the road. So, we've lived in other places, and I would love to bring it to Vermont. And I mean, the setup's pretty portable. We can do it.
Yeah, we're at an age where that's...
Yes.
Unless we do it all on vinyl. Which
podcast on vinyl.
Old school.
That's hilarious. Yeah, so I want to take it on the road, and I guess I just need to maybe find some people in between New Mexico and New York. I don't really know anyone.
Nah, there's nothing in between there. Just kidding. Okay, Christine. Well, thanks for being in the studio. I hope
sure. You did a great
some
job,
of this was
Tom.
listenable, and well, I guess we're done. Bye, everybody.
So thanks again for listening to the Sunshine Sound podcast. And so, as I mentioned in the interview, we are moving to New Mexico. So we are going to be taking a little bit of a break with the podcast, but this is not the last you're going to hear from us. We're going to keep this thing going because I love doing it, and I'm looking forward to talking to more musicians. I also have plans to take this on the road, so I'll be back in San Diego to talk to more of you guys, and hopefully all over the country. I'd love to make some trips, some stops in New England, where I have a lot of musician friends. So this is just to let you know that we are taking a little bit of a break, but we will be back. And in the meantime, please go on to sunshinesoundcenter.org. Check out some older episodes. We had so many great guests, so much fun that we had here in San Diego, and I hope all the guests had a great time as well. And we'll keep you posted on our next moves. We'll stay updated on social media as well. And if you want to stay in contact with me, you can always reach me at Christine with the C at sunshinesoundcenter.org. So thanks again. Thanks for tuning in to this one. This one was a little bit of a change, but I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks to Tom and Bobcat this week, not only for doing the audio engineering, providing the theme music, but also interviewing me. That was pretty cool. All right, so that's all we have for you That's all we have for you now. But I'll talk to you again soon. Have a good one.